Coming up, with the offseason looking like it should come sooner than later, Cam Thomas has emerged as an elite talent. Does the organization like him? Does the fan base believe in him? And would you trade him for a player like Donovan Mitchell? Oh, all the angles of Cam Thomas coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms and live with our bonus session on YouTube with you, the fans, talking about today. A little Cam Thomas, Doug, because I continue to be growing more and more fascinated about the way he gets discussed at every possible level. Because on the one hand, this is an elite talent that the Brooklyn Nets can build around. And on the other, the Cleveland Cavs would never want a player like this in a Donovan Mitchell trade. He doesn't even have any value in the NBA. Help me, Doug.
Yeah, it's so funny about Cam. Like, he's been a polarizing player from the time he was not playing at all on the bench. And then he gets to play more and take a lot more shots, and he's still polarizing, but the polarization has only gone up levels, right? Like, we all agree he shouldn't be on the bench anymore, which was like maybe a discussion at times about like how much he should be playing. Then it was discussion, well, maybe he's a glorified, maybe all he is a six man. And so then the polarization becomes around that, where like you're like, no, he should be starting. No, he should just be a six man. Well, now most people, at least on this Nets team, would agree. I mean, everyone would agree on this Nets team that he should be a starter, obviously. So now it's like, well, what's the ceiling and how much value does he have? And that's like, so that's the new thing. So a good sign is that if you look at the macro graph on Thomas has gone nothing but go up, right? Like, it's good, but nothing to go up with if you were like, shorting is the wrong thing, because it's like everyone always says shorting, but that's like not how it works. But if you were like down on him, like if you were taking the downside on him, you've been proven wrong basically every step of the way, I would say. But it also is one of these things where it's like at some point there's a ceiling too, right? Like, we have to just figure out where that, and I think that's the part where we're probably stuck on now, is like, what's the ceiling? What is his overall value? Like, could he command? Is he a guy that you want to build your team around? Is he a guy that could command something big on the market? I could go both ways on this. Like, this is tough. This is an interesting spot to be in heading into conceivably heading into the offseason, where the Nets are, basically all but locked into being in the offseason without the playoffs.
This is also in the month of March, coming off for Cam Thomas, where he averaged 36 minutes. He was giving you 27 points, shooting 46 from the field, shooting 39% from deep. We highlighted a couple episodes ago how he has 4 assists over the month of March, but you're starting to see that even tick up a little bit here too. So to your point, he's showing all the command and all of the attributes of a player that whatever it is. Ironically, there was a time when you and I discussed, well, he's really an off-ball 2 guard, right? And you need somebody else. Now, do I want to sit here and tell you plug him in as your starting point guard? No, probably not ideally, but he's pulled me far closer to that idea than I ever thought I would have been. First 2 seasons, not getting a lot of run, started this year even, where when he was on the court, you did everything you could to get the ball out of his hands. Like, the IQ is coming along for him. And this is where I don't know how to identify what the Nets should, not even what the Nets should value him as. What should the NBA value him as? Because the big talking point here is, which you and I agree is not likely or should not be the case, Donovan Mitchell. Well, we had this discussion in the middle of the year. What is Cam Thomas relative to Donovan Mitchell? Is he 70% of him? Because if he is, then why would you give up 9 draft picks or any combination thereof to go get a player that you maybe have a pretty close proximity to, and then you need to do other things? Like, I think that's the big talking point for the offseason. How does Cam Thomas and what the Nets feel about him impact the way they think they need to pursue or not pursue other decisions on the market?
Yeah, it's hard too, because the other problem is I think actually what's even more, I think it's two things are super difficult with this. I think it's very difficult to know where the Nets stand on him, right? They were so wrong on him for so long that it's like unclear to like know exactly where they stand.
Yeah.
I think I'm even more confused about like what his league wide value is. Like, how do
Mhm.
other teams even see him? I'm not sure. This is a very hard situation to sort of monitor and assess when it comes to him because he has certain skills. It's very obvious. But like, would other teams look at him and see him as like even close to a cornerstone piece, or like not even a cornerstone, like an every night rotational guy that you can keep in your lineup all the time on like a high end playoff team?
Hmm.
I'm not sure that other teams see him like that. I think that
That's
like
interesting.
he's afforded a lot of latitude on this team now because they're bad and they don't have no one else that can score or make their own shot. And so like he's allowed to take a lot of shots. But I don't know, put him in a hierarchy. This is not against him, by the way, but
Mhm.
like put him in a hierarchy where he's with a few other like really high end players. Like, how does he fit with that group? I'm not really sure. Right. Like,
Mm.
so the thought experiment more would be like, put him on a really good team right now. Where would he land? Would he be in the rotation? Like, just put him on any good team, Boston, Denver, any playoff team right now. Where would Cam Thomas be in the rotation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Like, and I think that's the hardest question to answer. Like, is how these other teams view his value. I could see it really being all over the place.
And I wonder too, because I want to pose a different question to you as far as league wide goes, but I also wonder like the perception piece of it too, right? Like if you're an NBA talent, we talked about this when the Nets drafted him. Well, he's a later first round pick, and we'd say if you redrafted, he would certainly go much higher, right? The Nets got a steal based
Yes, of
on
course.
where you drafted him. Okay. But then if you're a top 15 player and you go to a bad team and you put up the kind of numbers that Cam Thomas is putting up this season, I think the perception would be, well, if you get him to the better team or if you have the better players around him. Like, I wonder how much that tracks him, that follows him. There's obviously a reason why other teams passed on him. Maybe they didn't believe that everything was going to come around, that the three-point production could be sustained at the NBA level, or that you could trust him with the ball in his hands to be able to make the right reads, right? So there's some developmental stuff here that you could point to and say it's changed the perception around the league and that could elevate it. But I just wonder if pedigree and if the way you're viewed as a prospect, how long does that track with you into your NBA career? Because I could list plenty of players that were taking top 5, top 10, and they're productive. They put up points. Their team stinks. They lose a lot of games. But you're always thinking, if we just get the right pieces around them, they're going to be able to flourish. We're going to be able to win here.
Or
Thinking
it's
about
why you don't give up
good.
on those guys, or like you don't give up on those guys. Like
Right.
you don't give up on like Jaylen Green. Like you drafted him really high. There's a reason you did it. You don't give up, and then you hope that he turns the corner, and then he does. Right,
Yeah.
obviously. And now some people at the time thought Cam should be drafted higher, and his stock really fell. And sometimes it wasn't clear why, if it was like sort of attitude based or whatever. But he was clearly fell past where people thought he was originally going to get drafted. Landed at the Nets, and the Nets did a good job by drafting him, right? Like you're correct. He's outperformed his slot. He's still really young. He's improved every year. They screwed around with his minutes so much early on that it's like hard to like totally trust his development. The development track has not been linear, and that's going to be a really hard situation for any player to sort of like maintain consistency. That being said, he's been given, like I said, incredible latitude now to run parts of the offense and take a lot of shots, more than a lot of other guys his age in similar situations. So I think to some degree it's catching up because a lot of other young guys like this aren't given this kind of playing time and shot
Sure.
and usage, right? Like, so it is evening out, but I just don't know if it's evening out enough where we can like totally tell. This is not anti-Cam Thomas. I just
No.
mostly like, I don't know how other teams, I can make a case still about trading for him,
Mhm.
make a case. I can make a case against it. I could,
Right,
but
keeping him, building around him, like, right, you can make a case that the Nets should hold on to him and make him a part
I
of
can
what
make a
they
case
wanna do
for him.
here.
I can make a case for and against it very easily. Both sides.
100%.
Yeah.
Coming up here in a second, I'm gonna tie the Cam Thomas perception into one Mikal Bridges, and then we'll also discuss the Donovan Mitchell potential trade. Do you want Cam Thomas to be here with Donovan Mitchell, if it was even feasible? We'll talk about those angles of the offseason coming up here in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. That's what you're doing over there with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home the huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue our Cam Thomas discussion episode, reminder, live on YouTube, get your questions up at Locked On Nets. Segment number 3, we'll get a look in there. Give us your thoughts on Cam Thomas. Do you want him to be a cornerstone piece? Do you believe in him for Brooklyn? Or would you send him off to maybe recalibrate this team? And that's where I do find it interesting. So the tie to Mikal Bridges, I'll just say, Cam Thomas was never really cast in the role that Mikal was in Phoenix, as in being a key supporting player. He was basically buried and then all of a sudden started to get ramped up and then thrust into this role that he has now with Brooklyn. But do you think that maybe there is, I don't mean that the Mikal Bridges informs this for other teams, but just that same thing. Well, Mikal Bridges on Phoenix in X role versus Mikal Bridges in new role now with the Brooklyn Nets. Cam Thomas on Brooklyn, bad team, plenty of minutes, go do your thing, as you mentioned, versus playoff team, championship aspiration team. Where does he fit in? Can he be relied on? And could he maybe plug in as the third best player on a championship team if you had two of the other right guys in place? But that demands that he be highly productive, maybe on limited volume.
Yeah, I can't go there at all. I don't think that's right now. At least his current version of him. He's 22, so there's room for growth here.
Yeah,
so
I mean, like, what's like the best version of him, maybe as well, right?
Yeah, he's not a finished product for sure. Right now, no, I don't think you can do that. And again, like he just needs to. There's just a few things that are working against him to get to that level. By the way, this is again not enough. I've always to qualify everything with him because if you're in this day and age, if you say something that's not like supremely 1,000% positive, like you're anti the player, it's like very clearly not the case here. But there's just certain disadvantages he has. Like he still doesn't read the court perfectly. He's made huge strides here, right? Like he had great pass to Clowney here at the block on a roll. Like I think the court vision is getting much better. Size is always going to be an issue. It's like hard to just be this size. Like you need to be so great if you're going to be 6'3". You just have to be Kyrie or Steph. Like to be at that level, at like the highest level basketball player, if you're going to be and like amazing on defense, like Derek White or something.
Right.
Like,
which is another big part of this too.
These are the other things like you have to be like capable on offense and amazing on defense if you're going to be that size. So these things are always just be like a little self-limiting for him. Overall, it's probably why I think we see it like him not be involved in a trade. Like I think it'd be better to just keep him, see what you can develop. Let me put it this way. I doubt they would ever get like what anyone would consider like sort of fair market value on him, or especially what they're going to need from him. Like he's going to be really important for this team next year because they're not going to be able to score. They're not going to be able to score again. Like you think they have trouble scoring this year? Again, wait till next year. Like there's going to be a lot of the same cast of characters here. They're going to need him just around to just put fans in the seats and score some baskets. Like that might be his most important thing next year. Like that, he might be the most important guy in the Nets next year, just from that standpoint.
Yeah, you think about guys like Jalen Wilson. We see some more Noah Clowney now, but you don't look at any of these other young players that are going to get more minutes and more run as we go into next season and say, oh, well, that's where they'll start to share the scoring load. It's going to be the same people, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, right, that you're looking to help carry this load.
And by the way, we've seen it with Bridges, but I said this in the 2 episodes ago and actually looked at the numbers about like where his scoring had gone. It's like stark where Bridges' his shots are going. He's going right back to being a 3-and-D guy. Like he is all the way back. Like it was 5-day. If you look at his like 5-day running average of field goal attempts to 3-point attempts, or excuse me, the other way around, percentage of shots at a 3-point attempts, it's gone all the way up the ski slope, like to like 50, 60, 65% of his shots are threes, which just means he's just going back to a guy who can't really score anywhere else but from the 3-point line. So you're not, after we've gotten a whole season of it now, you cannot expect him to get scoring from him on a consistent nightly basis. So they just like need Thomas next year to not score 70 points a night. Honestly,
I one off the mark here about places that he could play or whatever. We were talking about championship aspiration teams. Okay, you're not going to put him there, but like I was just thinking like San Antonio. Like when you have Wemby and you look at their roster and needing some more scoring production in behind, like I think there are also teams, maybe you say bad teams, or even like out of the play-in tournament teams that you'd look at and based on the way they're constructed, kind of we're talking about the Nets. Well, they need to have a player that can get buckets, that can score. I could probably look around the league and see some teams that would say, well, we can go from being, a bottom feeder to competitive, or from almost competitive to play-in tournament bound if we had a type of electric scorer like this. But you bring up the good point about what is the value? So the Nets took him late first round. Does he have first round pick value in a trade right now? Would he probably? But what does that mean relative to Brooklyn and getting a first round pick in draft X versus having that production on the court right now? So that's why I do find him fascinating for the Nets and maybe even league wide, because they're probably, I'm sure you could probably list a handful of players off the top of your head, and maybe Jaylen Green's a good example in Houston coming on here now after being sluggish, of we're talking Nets internal. But if you went high level, there's a lot of guys that can do things-ish like what Cam Thomas is doing. He's not a unicorn talent in that regard, even if we think he's valuable.
No, he has extreme talent in one area, which is he can really score the basket on very difficult shots. He also can just take a lot of bad shots too. But I mean, for the most part, like we've seen, he has pretty unique shot making ability, I would say, compared to like a lot of NBA players. I think there is growth on his court vision. I think he seems to be really in tune to like trying to make that happen. We've seen the assist numbers go up month by month. He's probably run a little bad on assists too, because guys just like not finishing pretty easy setups that he had. But that could be a thing where it's like, hey, you just watch him a lot and you expect to see something, and the team's not bad. So I think the assist numbers could probably, frankly, be a little higher. But yeah, like looking around, most other teams have, I take that back. Some other guys have sort of like, microwave scoring kind of guys on the team. He has more space to be able to do a lot more, but he's also better at it than most guys too.
Yeah.
And so I just don't know. I get really confused about this. And I've been low on Thomas, probably relative to some other people. And I think that some things are still correct, by the way. Like some of the takes that we've had are still correct. I was like probably lower on his ability to probably like sort of hit the level that he's hit this year. I was going to be hard for me to see. It was also hard for me to see like a scenario where he was going to be allowed to be able to do this much also on the team.
Right.
Right. And we've also hit this other scenario that I didn't see coming. So that's not to say I was like right about that part. I wasn't. I was wrong. I think he's been better, but it's also what sort of clouds my sort of ability to be able to see how the rest of the league is going to see it.
And that's why in some ways it makes me long for the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Brooklyn Nets, where Cam Thomas was at least shown capable of doing this consistently, what he's doing now. And then what does that look like, right? Where would he have fit in if you had a very clear hierarchy, very clear superstars, and what would your role be? We often talk about him as the microwave scorer coming off the bench, sixth man leading a second unit. Fascinating to dream on that. Great news. We'll never get to see that. But coming up next, what if the Nets do want to go after Donovan Mitchell? Is he the type of player that could help unlock Cam Thomas and take this team out of the cellar? Let's have that discussion coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, highlights, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as a Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV and provides access to billions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. And it's opening weekends, baseball. It's a college basketball tournament. You're going to want to watch it all with Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of your latest videos of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big league pro and college conferences as well. They got NBA, MLB, March Madness, so much more, plus news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV.
All right, so as we continue our Locked On Nets episode live on YouTube, feel free to throw your comments in there, and let's see if we can go ahead and get your pulse of the fan base, because there is this overarching thing, which maybe, honestly, not maybe, we know we're going to talk about the Donovan Mitchell of it all in the offseason and what the Nets are willing to do and the fit and the cost and the price and all of those things. But I'm interested how the Nets fan base feels about Cam Thomas right now and whether or not You think it's worth it to cast him off for a draft pick, or take the long view and believe that he could actually be a key cornerstone piece over the next 5 years in Brooklyn?
Yeah, look, we'll hit a couple questions here. I'm going to go this real quick. I don't think Cleveland would take Cam Thomas to the centerpiece of a deal for Donovan Mitchell. Let me just, I'll say that real quick, and then we'll hit some questions to finish out the episode.
My belief is, good.
I just don't think that like it fits the way the rest of the team is built. Like, I just think that's it. Like, I don't think you would pair that well with Garland. Like, we've already seen. He's just like a not as good a version of Donovan Mitchell, and that didn't really work with Garland. So like, I just don't know why that would be him. Again, not a knock on Cam Thomas. I'm just saying, like, for that particular team, I'm not sure why he would be a centerpiece of that deal unless their hands were totally tied.
And this comes back to the idea of what is his value around the league. Because you know me, Doug, when I talk trade machines, I talk 2, 3 teams getting involved. Like, ultimately, does he have value where Cleveland would look at it as, you're an asset, we can bring you in, pass you along, get something back for you, right? Find a different landing spot to go ahead and still get ourselves additional value out of this. We always say with that Donovan Mitchell, the asking price is going to maybe end up being players that you think you want to have here in the core around him, like a Mikal Bridges potentially going forward. Okay.
We got some good ones in here. That I don't know if people have asked to be put on this, but I knew this was going to come up. And if you're on the podcast, we're going to throw some questions up here on live. I knew this would happen. We can't tell that you don't like them. I knew this would happen. You can't say anything about anybody. Like, you can't say.
But before you address Jug specifically here, I'm going to explain to me one-to-one why you don't like him. Like, explain to me one-to-one why you don't like Cam Thomas.
I like him fine. He's good. I told you I was wrong. I was wrong on the assessment here. I'm just saying that the assessment has continually changed and gone up. Now, that's a case for he's better than we all think. Because if like I said, to go back to the beginning, if he's been polarizing the whole time and the polarization graph just continues to go up, then, can we expect like sort of linear progress on like his development?
Yeah.
I don't think you can, but you could also say we haven't seen the ceiling right. Haven't seen the ceiling yet.
How about Greg here? With Mikal was never a number 1 and should have never been put just a good player. This is what we've talked about, right? Over evaluating, if you're Sean Marks, the value of a player, trying to make the best thing that you can. And one of 2 things, actually, something we've never discussed is the idea of, if you viewed him maybe somewhat correctly, he's a high-level player, but he's not a number 1, and we don't want to put him there. There's a world where the Nets should have kept on going and continued to make bigger moves, even off of the Kevin Durant one, getting Mikal and Cam Johnson, because what you ended up doing was over-slotting players in your hierarchy and creating a dysfunctional roster, right? Like, that's something that I think maybe it's hard to do that if you're a GM, but you should have gone almost even more aggressive and keep taking swings and try to get involved in any players available to really reconstruct the team on the fly and make them competitive.
Yeah, we've already said this, that they just they had a chance to sort of take on a bunch of other, like, maybe depressed assets and sort of rebuild, but they didn't want to do that, right? They didn't want to come out of the KD and Kyrie era, and Harden era, and have it be bad again.
He talks about some of these moves real quick here from Jean Ramey. There's something else that we've also said. Even if just to be clear, if you haven't seen the episodes, Doug and I are not, it's not a knock on Donovan Mitchell. We are not a pro trade for Donovan Mitchell podcast, because we still think there'll be about a 9 or 10 team at best trying to get in the play-in tournament. We probably a little bit higher than that. But if the ceiling is talking about them being a 7th seed, a 6th seed with kind of low ceiling expectations of making the Eastern Conference Finals, that's where you need to stop short of putting a bunch of your assets on the table to go get a player that doesn't move the needle far enough, that still requires another move, and you don't have any of that capital necessarily to go facilitate that.
Yeah, if you can get one of these guys, if Mitchell gets all the way to free agency and you can get him without giving up any picks,
right?
Then all for it. And they will have max slots open in 2025. And if you think that these guys can get all the way to free agency, unrestricted free agency, then I'm going to change my tune. The problem is these guys just haven't been hitting free agency, right? Like KD and Kyrie were literally the last 2 to do it. that were actually like huge needle movers.
Right.
No one else has hit unrestricted free agency like with that kind of talent. It's just everyone's signing early, taking the money, and asking for trades later. Maybe that changes with the new the new TV deal and the money, the cap spikes in 25. And there's like, sort of unprecedented abilities to like make a lot of money on the open market, a la sort of what happened in those last cycles, like with KD and with the Warriors and stuff. But that's a risk, like, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are unloading assets to get one of these other guys. So if you really are confident that they're going to hit it, I'm actually for that part. I'd be okay with that. It's the unloading everything, mortgaging the future once again for guys who aren't on like that KD level.
Right.
Like that would be a mistake. That's all I'm saying.
Scam likely came in with, just like Curry, you need to put complementary pieces around Thomas. Listen, this is dangerous. There's a dangerous statement to make when you're on the Locked On Nets chat here on YouTube for Doug Norrie. Go ahead.
It's not dangerous. It's silly. Like, I mean, can we stop? Like Steph Curry. And by their games aren't.
Cam Thomas is basically right there. Like, I mean, okay.
I'm not even addressing this. I was gonna say, going to the reasons they're not the same and their games aren't the same, but it's too silly to even it's too silly to even think. They're just like, their games aren't the same. Steph Curry's like a top 10 all-time player, and we're talking about Cam Thomas. So, you
know what, too, like, and I will say about it before we get to Gerard here, a frequent flyer with us, I will also say that, like, this is also what happens when you're a fan of a team and an organization that's just, throwing things against the wall and it all seems chaotic and messy. When you see a young player that's like performing well, you want them to turn into that thing, because you're like, well, if Cam Thomas becomes, a top 25 guy, well, all right. Like, look, we got lucky and fell into this thing, right? If Nick Claxton, I mean, I've been as guilty of this as anyone, waiting for the next step, the next evolution of his game. Okay, if the mid-range is something just around the basket, inside the elbow, but when that doesn't quite get there, you have to just acknowledge what a player is, at least currently, and not start to make maybe fringe dangerous comps when you talk to other players and stars, elite all time.
Well, it's funny though, but the reason I started that one is like to sort of laugh at it a little bit, but also to highlight how the fan base really feels about this guy.
And
right?
You're desperate for it, right? Yeah, you're desperate for it to be that good. And you're like, come on, bring him. Let's get talent around him so that he can.
And like I said, where people even like us along the way, or me, have been wrong along the path, it's easy for like to me be wrong again, right? Like it's easy to look at the statements down and be like, oh, you're still too low. It could be true. But it highlights, yes, the fan base here is starved, rightfully so, for like anybody that can be good, because here's the problem. We argue about Cam Thomas. After him, there's no arguments. You know why? Because they all stink.
Yep.
So there's no arguments to even have. Everyone agrees. Everyone's in total lockstep after him. It's like, what's everyone else? Bad / overpaid / overrated. No, like we're not arguing about anybody else. That's the sad state of affairs, that like Cam's been slotted into this argument zone, mostly because the rest of the team is without argument. They're all not as good as anyone thought they were going to be. That's actually the biggest problem.
Before we close out with Gerard here, that's like, OKC when they got young and they had all these talent. There's so many different players, and there's who should it be? Like, if we're going to maybe move a guy to bring in a guy, what decisions will we make? There's all of this talent in different positions in different ways. You go, oh, well, who should the core be? Then that's, as you say, Cam Thomas. And Day'Ron Sharpe is a Nicholas.
I just never thought about that before until right now. Sometimes like these ideas come out and you're like, oh, that's actually the thing. It's like there's no one else
with no other choice. We will cling to the hope of anything. Yeah.
No one's even interesting after him. Like he's at least interesting. And then we can like disagree a little bit, because after that it's like, well, Simmons 0 gone. He like that's over. Cam Johnson, the contract is looking bad already, right? Like it's just like he's probably almost for sure never going to live up to that contract. Claxton, we can talk about a little bit, though. Every game that passes, it gets harder and harder to see you wanting to pay money. Like no one, like who's out there really wanted to sign Nick Claxton to like a really big money contract. Maybe those people are out there. McHale, we know exactly what he is now.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so we've gotten a long sample size with that. And after that, I'm not even sure we have to talk about anybody else. So it's like, it's almost like Cam's unfortunately just the only guy that's even interesting that you might have a little disagreement about, and that you can sort of dream on maybe having a higher ceiling that he has now.
Gerard said your name 3 times now, because it's hard for us to close out our episodes sometimes. Live on YouTube, obviously talking a little bit of Cam Thomas. Gerard, what's the story about Houston cannot keep both Sengun and also Jaylen Green with contract extensions? Can we pry away maybe I'll say one of them from Houston. I mean, obviously we know that it's all but been reported about the Jaylen Green scenario and the package, whether or not that would be on the table again for Brooklyn in the offseason, whether or not it would be less draft picks included. We don't know, TBD. But would you find that fascinating to maybe go after Şengün and bring him in as the new centerpiece of what the Nets want to accomplish?
Yeah, they're both coming up on team options for this year. Like they're going into next year, they both have team options, which I'm sure will be exercised, and then like with the hope that they'll work out one of these new extensions.
Yeah.
I don't think they can pay both, but I think they can pay. I think they have it in there to pay both, but like they're being the cap for 1 year as they clear away 1 year of the Van Vliet thing. I'd be sure about that one, but like their cap is pretty clean in 25-26 outside of Van Vliet, but he makes such a big number at 45 that maybe that will preclude them from signing both to like what they're now worth. I mean, Green's like clearly played himself into like a bigger number now, like just for the sample size. So maybe there's a world where they just like want to consolidate a little bit. They have so much young talent too that they probably could consolidate a little bit and into like someone superstar-ish, but like the Nets don't really have that. Like this is where this is where Nets fans have also like told themselves like the wrong story. Like everyone wants it both ways. It's like Bridges isn't that good, but if you want him, I mean, we're going to need Şengün and some picks back. It's like, come on. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, so I think that's the problem. So I think if those guys hit the market might even be beyond what Brooklyn can do. And now they could probably get them, but it would take a lot, right? Like, and this is what happens when you don't have young talent. You haven't drafted forever. You don't have the players to put into stuff.
This
right?
would be, that's like, the sending Mikal out to Houston and, and figuring out where that value versus Şengün lines up, and then the picks, et cetera. And okay, now you've converted it because you even said there too about, Mikal, now we'll send him out to get XYZ back. Or even on the other version of it, if you bring in the star to Brooklyn and you have Mikal and you have Cam Johnson, I just think that, we've both been agreeing here. The sample size tells you that even with one superstar, it's not the right combination of cast here. Because, oh, by the way, there was a team in Phoenix that had Devin Booker and had Cam Johnson and had Mikal Bridges. You know what they chose to do? Trade them away to get Kevin Durant.
And Chris Paul.
Right. Like they made the choice of like, this isn't good enough. We need to go even better here with a player like Devin Booker as one of our cornerstone pieces.
And that team went to the finals.
Yes.
And they didn't win, right? Like that was a great team. They went to the finals. They just couldn't get past Giannis. And that was the year that, the Nets are going to be like, and they wouldn't have been able to get past Brooklyn if they'd all stayed together too. Like that was the year. But like, yeah, we've seen that core, and that you need to have great players at that core to like be in a championship level. And I just think they're, just not where they are. Okay. We've been at it. Look, it's an hour on YouTube, baby, after the Nets get trounced. Go show me another podcast in the world that's doing that. You're not going to find it. Locked on Nets every single day. Again, I'll say this again. 0-82. 0-82. Yep. We're coming at you every single day.
That's right.
That's what it is. And by the time you listen to this, they'll probably be officially eliminated from playoff contention. But in the meantime, make sure you go over and subscribe to Locked On Nets at YouTube. Much appreciate everyone that jumped in after a game. Yeah, look, we love that everyone that's rolled with us all these years on the Locked On Nets podcast. We're going to keep going for years. Doesn't matter who's on the team. We'll complain about it, but we're still going to be here every single day. So make sure you just subscribe to YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast.
I'd rather imagine who you might be than who you actually are. That's Thomas Yates.
Oh, Tommy, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.